Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever and whenever you are. Welcome to the AI for Wildlife Challenge number 2 info session. My name is Buster Franken. I am the founder of FruitPunch AI, and I'm gonna walk you through today. I will be your guide, and let's jump right in. So the agenda for today's session is first an introduction to the challenge, how I got involved, how FruitPunch AI got involved, and also a little presentation of previous challenge results. Then I'm going to introduce the different partners, and Matt Lewis from Cape AI is going to tell a few words about that specific partner. Then SPOTS, short for Strategic Protection of Threatened Species, are going to give a presentation. This is given by Peter and Robbie, the conservationists, lifelong conservationists. After that, there will be time for Q&A, and then I will go into the goals and the format of this specific challenge, closing off with another Q&A. Now, this project, AI for Wildlife, this series of challenges, started for me almost 2 years ago already, when I met Peter Bohn, the founder of Cape AI, and we had this crazy idea of using AI, using our skills and our network in AI to make a difference in the world of wildlife conservation. So I got to South Africa, and there I got to meet these beautiful, wonderful people from SPOTS, our main stakeholder in this challenge as well, the conservationists that are active in Pilanesberg, that's near to Johannesburg in South Africa, where they are actually flying with drones, and they showed me the beauty and the terror of wildlife conservation. So these beautiful animals, and then also, of course, all the tactics and the horrible stuff that the poachers are doing. And it really inspired me. And they also showed me the tech that they are using. So they are using drones that they control, RC-controlled drones, with thermal cameras, and they're flying during the night, searching for poachers. And on the left, you can actually see the cart that they use with the radio, because there is no cell signal or anything like that in the parks. And these drones produce this kind of data. So this is thermal data, where you can see some poachers walking around there. And that is what we will be focusing on in this challenge as well. But first, since I started this almost 2 years ago with this first AI for Good project, I set up FruitPunch AI, which is a global AI for Good community, with which we really crowdsource AI solutions to places where resources are scarce. So real-world AI solutions to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, like these challenges around AI for wildlife, but also more topics like AI for health and climate, together with European Space Agency and lots more. So it's crowdsourcing with you wonderful people through global bottom-up collaboration with people from all over the world. And this is kind of a double-edged sword, because this is a way to bring AI to places where resources are most scarce and where it's thus most effective as well. And it's also a great way for people that are participating to learn about the real-world application of artificial intelligence and also apply their skills to, do some good. Now, with the first AI for Wildlife challenge that we did, we started, I think, almost half a year ago. These were some of the results that came out of that. So I'm just going to briefly go over this, because there's actually a whole presentation video detailing everything that has been done of the final presentation of this challenge. But the results were a Detectron 2 model that proved that detecting poachers on the thermal video feed is actually possible. There was much more and higher quality data collected. A lot of data was labeled as well, and supporting code for labeling and wrangling data was created. And the groundworks and schematics for the hardware needed to run this model on edge was made by this wonderful team, of which you can see quite a large selection here in one of my Zoom screenshots. Now, the challenges that they ended up with at the end of this challenge was that this model was way too big to run on edge. So they tried this one model, the Detectron 2, which is actually not ideal for grayscale images, video footage, but also quite a big model. And of course, it needs to be able to run on the plane for reasons that I will go into later as well. So there was no time to optimize, try different models, and there's no final hardware architecture, which means that it couldn't be implemented on the plane yet. So this gives the wonderful opportunity to not only do some very interesting exploration on creating smaller models during this challenge, but also the foresight of actually being able to implement this on the plane at the end of this coming challenge, which is just incredibly exciting to me. And I think that it will be just as exciting to you and to the people from Spots. So we're going to use Slido today. This is a way for you guys to ask questions while the talks are in session. After that, you can also join the live Q&A, but you can also ask your questions here in the Slido. Now, here again, the info session agenda. So we just had my introduction. Now we're going to go to Matt Lewis for a few words about one of our main partners, Cape AI. So, Matt, take it away.
All right, Buster, thanks very much. As Buster said, we are a project partner at Cape AI, and he also mentioned that he ended up in South Africa originally at the invitation of Peter Boone, who is our CEO. So there's been a long link between the Cape AI and this project in its early days. And we're an AI and data science consultancy based in Cape Town, South Africa, and the Netherlands. And the reason that we are a project partner is that members of our team have time during business hours to devote to extra projects. And I chose to do that during Challenge 1. And during Challenge 2, two of my colleagues, Samuel and Christo, are going to be involved in the development side of things. And I'm going to be giving a masterclass on South African ecology and how ecological processes in situ could affect the implementation of these AI tools and processes. And for those who are wondering, I did a PhD in ecology, so that's actually my stronger background is that rather than the AI side of things. So I'm going to try and combine those two into a really interesting, useful masterclass during this challenge. And that's that.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay. Yeah, super good to have you again, Matt, the MVP of our last challenge. So without further ado, we're going to go on to Peter. And Peter is going to give the story of, well, SPOTS, the Strategic Protection of Threatened Species, about the wildlife conservation efforts that they've been doing. And together with Robbie, they're also going to go into the tech that they've been using and the challenges that they've encountered so far. So save your questions for in the live Q&A or put them into the Slido, and we will go through that during the Q&A. But then now I'm gonna shut up and give the word to Peter.
Cool. Good evening, everyone, from down here in South Africa. Matt's not too far away from me right now. He's kind of about 5 hours west. But the challenges that we face are right on our doorstep. I mean, they're all over South Africa, and they're certainly all over Africa. On behalf of Rob, who's with us this evening, and the rest of the SPOTS team, I just want to seriously thank you guys for the opportunities that you give us to present our problems, our desires and our wishes. To thank you for the efforts that you continue making, and we're certainly making inroads. So, okay, a little history on SPOTS. Strategic protection of threatened species was never ever intended to be a species-specific conservation effort. As the name implies, we just a bunch of guys who are seriously concerned about the conservation and protection of any wildlife, and in particular, threatened or endangered species. So, how did the whole rhino thing happen then? Well, we were involved in leopard conservation and other endangered species, and kind of about 15, 20 years ago, the whole rhino problem really started pinging on the radar. And I mean, I remember Rob and I sitting around a fire somewhere up in Nevada and saying, geez, you know what, we lost 50 rhino this year to poaching, and maybe this is something we need to be focusing on. And it was shattering how quickly that 50 rhino escalated to 1,200. That's how quick it happened. I mean, within 8 or 10 years, we weren't looking at 50, we were looking at 1,200. So now, anybody who maybe even doesn't have a heart in imagining, the enormity of 1,200 of these beautiful animals being slaughtered on our doorstep, even they would probably be looking at and saying, well, how many do we have? And what is the sustainability? And that's where the real issues started pinging. So some history then, right? Just regarding rhino. In the late 50s, early 60s, we were down to 500 or 600 rhino in South Africa. And my mentor was a guy by the name of Dr. Ian Play, who's, if you Googled him, you're going to spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe a week, going through everything that incredible man did. But Ian, Dr. Play then decided to move a lot of rhino, as many as he could find, move them out of KwaZulu-Natal into the Kruger National Park. Nobody knew the enormity of the problem, but he found somewhere around 500. That was all of the southern white rhino that still existed on the planet. So through serious conservation and energy and commitment from people, that number was grown very, very significantly and very successfully to around about 18,000. Okay. Now, I want you to remember that number. Okay, 500 to 18,000. Okay. About 10 years ago, the demand for white rhino or any rhino started escalating hugely worldwide, driven particularly by traditional Chinese medicine beliefs, TCM, and then the kind of emerging affluence out of a lot of the other Eastern countries, Vietnam included. So all of a sudden we had a significant pressure being placed on rhino resource right throughout Africa. And I use that word resource with a measure of heartburn, because that is what the animal became. It became a resource rather than something that deserved a life and deserved to be viewed as one of the big five. It became a resource. That's kind of about where Rob and I became involved, and we've been combating it ever since. The success story that we would love as a generation leader of our generation cannot be told, because singularly we have failed. As a generation, we have let future generations down badly in the conservation of our planet, and particularly the conservation of threatened and endangered species. So Spots stands at the forefront of correcting that. That is what we will attempt as best we possibly can to fix. So what's the situation now? So from 18,000 about 10 years ago, we're probably down to around about 7,000 to 8,000 rhino southern white rhino in the country right now, in South Africa. Black rhino, probably a little worse off. We're looking at probably around about 4,000 to 5,000. And they are maybe being generous. So our efforts in protecting that species are just, I mean, we cannot overemphasize the importance of it. So what does this take? What is the threat that we're facing? Well, the demand is certainly out of the East. China, traditional Chinese medicine still driving demand. The emerging markets of Vietnam, etc., also unfortunately growing. And there's a different, there's, you know, many people believe or are misled into thinking that the threat that we face is through unsophisticated poaching efforts. They're not. The syndicates driving rhino poaching right throughout Africa, and we stand as the holder of possibly the biggest resource of rhino in the world right now in this country. So Rob and I have been, we've fought this problem throughout Africa. We're in Mozambique, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and in Tanzania, the place as big as the saloon, we never ever saw one, not one wild rhino, nothing. We saw signs of them, occasional spoor, but nothing. So anybody who's saying that Tanzania has a whole lot of rhino, forget it. Not in the Southern Saloon, and not in the Selous Game Reserve total. Masai Mara, potential. But we're facing a huge, huge problem. And we've been fighting this, as I say, for probably the past 10, 15 years. Spots' conservation focus has shifted from conservation of threatened species to fighting poaching, and fighting rhino poaching in particular. The logic behind that is that if we are that useless, that we cannot protect, successfully protect, and encourage the future generation of rhino, a species iconic of rhino, what chance do the other species? So many people stop us and say, but what about pangolin? What about African rock python? What about, yeah, they you know, the onslaught on our natural resources is huge. But the bottom line is, if we are that useless, we cannot protect a species as iconic as rhino, then, you know, what chance do the rest have? So we've allowed spots to become essentially rhino-centric. 99.9% of our effort is focused on preventing poaching of rhino. White rhino and black rhino in South Africa right now. As I said earlier on, we're probably down to around about 7,000 to 8,000. The concern that I have, and I mentioned earlier on, that, you know, we need to consider that the work that Ian Player did of, you know, 500 to 18,000. I mean, we've got to remember that that places a fairly significant strain on the gene pool, on the genetic of a species. So we're not sure that, you know, where we're going to end up in that red zone again. But what I firmly do believe, and what Dr. Player's great concern was, that we cannot afford to have the gene pool erode much further than it is right now. Because then the recovery starts realizing genetic defect. So, you know, we don't want to see rhino being subject to or being vulnerable to something like tuberculosis, lion. So that just accelerates our efforts. We've got to stop poaching. We've got to arrest poaching of rhino in this geography as aggressively and as quickly as we can. The signs up until 6 months ago were really, really good. You know, we had reduced poaching in the Pilanesberg from kind of around about 8 to 9 a month down to 0 for 6 months, then, you know, 2 over 2 month period. We're under significant pressure again right now. For whatever reason, the syndicates have upped the game. We're under tremendous pressure. Poaching efforts are escalating weekly and certainly over every full moon. So, yeah, I mean, the best way we can combat this is to have intelligence and serious technological capability on our side. The value add, the big one that we've got is drones. Undoubtedly, they're helping us tremendously, you know, not just from a deterrent point of view, but also from an intercept point of view. So in other words, I mean, we can fly what we call dirty flights. We can exhibit a very aggressive presence in an area, which discourages penetration of a reserve or a poaching attempt. But more importantly, if someone has dared to transgress and infiltrate a reserve, drones are the best possible option we have to detect them. So now comes the question, well, I mean, Rob and I have spent, and many of our operators have spent hours in the remotes trying to watch a computer screen and geez, see a spot. Oh, what was that? I mean, could it be? And try and circle the zone, the drone around again, and get a better image of it, and just not on. So the AI guys, the work that you people are doing, I hesitate to say this, but I seriously don't think that any of you will realize the true value of what you're doing until it's done. And you can come down, you can see the success. Don't underestimate for a single second the value that you are bringing to our efforts, and not just our efforts, to conservation worldwide. Anybody can learn from space. We are not a closed book. Whatever we're doing to hit success, we will gladly provide to anybody else out there. The advice, the operating strategies, everything that we do that achieves success can be conveyed worldwide. And you guys are standing at the forefront of that right now. So, Rob, if you want to add something. Robbie?
Yeah, evening, guys. Hi, all.
You're awake?
And before I start, Matt, congratulations and good luck. I believe the baby's on the way pretty soon.
Yeah, 2 months, Robbie. 2 months. Hence my partial withdrawal from the next challenge of the project.
No worries. It'll all be good. So look, guys, what I just wanted to add to that, you know, conservation as a rule, specifically in Africa, and I think generally all over the world, but more focused in Africa. The challenges we have is quite simple. You know, you've just got too much space and too little resource to look after that space. When I say space, I'm talking about your reserves and parks, etc. Now, add to that there's, you know, before conservation was, you know, managing a park, which obviously entails a whole lot of management bits and pieces from an ecological perspective and all the rest of the stuff that goes with it. Now, add to that aggressive poaching tactics. Now your staff have to be upskilled. It's not what they trained for. You know, they didn't want to be involved in gunfights and hunting poachers, etc. So it adds tremendous strain to the current structure. And you're left with some of the private reserves who could financially afford some quasi-military style anti-poaching teams, but those are very few and far between. Your big parks, national parks, just don't have those resources. And how we got involved with Pilanesberg is we essentially said, we will do this for free. Just give us the accommodation, and the project is essentially a research and development project to look at technology. I mean, we decided to go down the technological pathway for that simple reason. Too much space, not enough resource, and your best force multiplier is an eye in the sky, you know, via drone or UAV, whatever you want to call it. You know, the amount of surface area that we can cover on a drone is insane if you try and get that same done with rangers on the ground. So that's the reason why we went down, you know, the UAV route. And as Peter said, we've spent thousands of hours watching monitors, and you know, from a perspective of personnel, you know, I know I could go to sleep if I needed to, and I know if Peter's awake, he will be fully committed staring at that screen, and vice versa. But there's not that many people out there that would do the same, spend countless hours watching a monitor. So, you know, some of the things that we need to look at from a tech perspective is exactly that. And this is where the AI and you guys are going to come into it. It also brings, for me, a huge element of transparency in this process, because we could replicate this model, but I'm maybe a bit of a control freak. If I'm not sitting in the caravan checking out what's happening on the monitors, I'm not sure, unless it's Peter, that anybody else would, you know, share or how can I say, commit to the same passion that we have. But now if you automate the system, I could be resting somewhere and I would get pinged on my phone that the UAV has picked something up that, you know, is 80% human, and immediately know that that could be streamed or sent to all people all over the world committed to a project. And for me, that just solves the problem of the space versus resource issue. When I say resource, I'm talking about skilled people that and you know, like your rangers and anti-poaching teams, etc., that we don't have or are lacking. So this step for me is, you know, it's huge. And as Peter said, you guys don't realize the value that this could bring from a conservation perspective, not only locally, throughout Africa and globally, because typically these situations are the same all over. You have too much space to monitor and not enough funds or skilled people to do the job. And then comes, you know, that's why I'm saying the element of transparency. You must understand that syndicates, you know, operate, people think that they're, you know, they're at a different level. They try and foresee every possible configuration of resistance or any counter-poaching techniques way before you start. So yeah, it's as Peter said, and I can't even express it, I can't even explain it to you, the value that you guys will bring to doing this can be rolled out all over. And it's not just about saving rhino. The next one on the species that's already starting to ping is elephant again. And thereafter, who knows what keeps going, but the tech can be used regardless of species and area. So to me, that's where the focus should be, until we get, you know, the clever guys like Matt and his background creating clone rhinos and breeding them out of stem cells. But until that happens, we've got to rely on the tech to protect them as much as we can. So yeah, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. Yeah, I don't know if there's any questions or if there's anything else, Buster, that you want me to touch on, but without boring everybody to death, I want to just thank you guys in advance. Thank the guys that partook in the last one, and I'm really looking forward to to the results that we're going to get out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Robbie and Peter, for that introduction. And we already have some questions in the Slido, but actually, for me, if you can just briefly go into so you've been using these UAVs. You've been using those with thermal cameras, specifically flying at night. So you sketched that problem. Now we have a question here that asks, have traditional vision techniques been considered, such as adjusting for camera translation and then motion detection to find candidate windows for deep learning? I think this is a very technical question on the deep learning side. Maybe I think actually all questions here are more going into the technical parts of the previous challenge. So are there any questions for Robbie and Peter about their conservation efforts and the tech they're currently using, for people that want to ask a question live? So remember that you have to unmute and then you can ask a question. I'm just going to give that a couple of seconds so anyone can hop on.
The drone that you're using, does it have the like a GPS, or how does it kind of say where it is?
Yeah, so the UAV, to cut a long story short, we essentially ended up building our own because there was nothing that was commercially available off the shelf that would achieve what we needed to do. The current structure of the plane is a 3-meter wingspan. It was designed by a volunteer aerodynamicist whose job is really to actually design military spec drones. And it flies for approximately 3 hours. It's electric. And at about 120 meters, you don't hear it. It has full GPS, full autopilot systems. It basically, there's very little that you cannot do with it. Whatever you can think of, it can be done. We have been working on the gimbal. It's a belly lander, so it lands in the bush, on the sand, on our sand roads, and hence why the wingspan is so short, to make sure that we can land on a what we call a sand road or a dirt road in the middle of the bush. It's deployed hand launched, and the video feed is sent back from the plane down to our ground station, which is a caravan with all the monitors and everything. The autopilot systems, all the technical stuff I've given to Buster, but yes, it does have full GPS, and the autopilot system is actually pretty impressive. The new current video link and telemetry link system we're using is called the HearLink, which we will be testing pretty soon, but the guys are achieving well over 20 kilometers, which is what we managed to achieve with our older technology, which is analog stuff. This stuff is all new. The benefit of the new system is we don't have a separate video and a separate telemetry feed. It's all in one, so 1 in 10 on the plane, which obviously weight and drag is reduced by virtue of that. What else can I tell you about the plane? It's rough and ready. It takes a lot of pounding in the bush, and it needs to be. Some of the factors when we were considering what type of plane to build and all the rest of it, and what materials to use. It had to be easily repairable in field, because typically we're not a couple of hours. We're always a couple of hours away from anything that remotely resembles a shop where you can go buy bits and pieces. So yeah, so the materials that we've used to keep it light were a blend of polystyrenes and expanded polypropylenes with some composite glassing here and there. And the rest of it, the plane is essentially just the vehicle for us to be able to get our video stream. And traditionally, as Buster knows, and a couple of the guys that have worked, we've sent them a couple of 1,000 hours of thermal footage, and essentially we just used to sit behind a monitor and watch and control the plane, and you know, achieved fair amount of success with the old system. The plane, we almost you know, rebuilt it. We've gone for a newer wing, more efficient, and now with this stuff that's happening with you guys, you know, onboard nano computers to do the AI, and a couple of other bits and pieces. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. There are some pictures, and I think Buster's got a couple of videos. There are, you know, like I said, we're trying to keep it as simple as possible, and we joke because when it comes to computing, I'm kind of the last guy that you want to try and switch something on, because typically if it doesn't work, I take a hammer and I just smash it. I keep saying that if it's not fit for purpose, it mustn't be in my way. It must never impede me in doing what I want. And Johan's laughing there because we developed some other technology, and the whole brief was it must be Robi proof. One button to operate everything. You can't be in the middle of the bush, surrounded by Big Five, under pressure, and you've got 1,000 things to think about to keep, one, the plane in the air, and two, to be on target, you know, in those situations. So yeah, we try and keep it as simple as possible. Well, that's one of my main requests, to keep it simple. Everything must be one button, on or off, or, you know, fly or land, target lock or none. So yeah, I don't know if that, Matthew, if that's helped you a little bit more.
Oh yeah, that was a great. Yeah, now the next question was going to be like all the specifications, but yeah, you've given them all. It's great.
Yeah, it's for the real details, we will have to start the challenge and sign the NDA. I think that's the next step. But yeah, what Robbie said about, you know, it being Robi proof, that's of course also the kind of the requirement if you want to at some point roll this out to more places where there's no because I've seen Robbie in action, and he's actually pretty delicate. Where there's no Robbies and Peters operating the planes, so that's where the real test is, and it has to be kind of like yeah, ready to go, idiot proofed. So we have quite a few questions, technical questions, that I will go into at the second Q&A after my introduction of the challenge. But we do have one question here for Robbie and Peter. Which is what kind of resistance would you envision from poachers? And it says, should drones be used in anti-poaching efforts? But drones are used in anti-poaching efforts because that's what Spot is doing. But so that's maybe the question then. What kind of resistance have you experienced from poachers?
Peter, I'll leave that to you. Unmute yourself. Peter, you need to unmute yourself.
Peter has dropped off the face of the earth.
Yeah,
this
is what I have to put up with. Peter, unmute yourself.
The bottom left corner, Peter.
Observe.
Okay.
See. Did I get it right?
Yep.
It's perfect.
Did I sing the national anthem now? All right. So can everybody hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Look, you know, resistance is it's something that is gonna occur. can occur against any effort to prevent poaching. But let's talk specifically about the UAVs. You know, in areas like the Kruger, certainly UAVs have been fired on, but you know, it's not going to happen where we are. You know, typically you've got to sort of put your mind into that person who's committing the crime, and essentially they are committing that crime. And the minute the drones come in over them or the UAV comes in over them, the first thing they want to do is bolt. I mean, they want to try and get out of the reserve, get under cover, whatever, as quickly as possible. So the risk that we run on having the UAV shot out of the sky is a lot lower than the risk of having them firing on us. So yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that answers the question, and that leaves us time for one short last question in this round. I'm gonna completely butcher this name, but I'm gonna try anyway. So Min Enhle, you can go ahead.
It's Minenhle, but it's okay. I have a question. Very interesting topic. I'm an anthropologist. I'm not technical. I'm not a data scientist or a designer. Obviously interested in culture and people's life patterns. Yeah, and I'm also doing a PhD, which is themed on artificial intelligence. So this is a very interesting discussion for me. And I want to know what you think about tackling a problem that has a root cause you're not really addressing, because I think poaching or the rhino horn has a huge demand on cultural patterns in Asia. And I understand the need for technology on the ground and its importance to target poachers, but there still will remain a demand for the rhino horn, regardless of the local interventions that you would do. So what collaboration, what interventions might you consider alongside the technological application in order to, I don't know, impact on cultural patterns, if at all, if that's even possible? Because there's just a long history of the need of the rhino horn, which I think is very hard to tackle. You know, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a huge wound, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think that, you know, it's a very real problem. And you've hit one of the nails right on the head. And that is that unless we can educate the users of rhino, you can educate them in terms of the futility of using the product, because that's what they see. They don't see an animal with a horn on its head. They see a product that they've been told will alleviate certain medical conditions. So, you know, until we can educate that population and that potential consumer, that rhino horn holds absolutely no medicinal value whatsoever. Now, think about this one. I mean, you know, this is not something new. We've been trying to educate traditional Chinese market medicine or traditional Chinese medicine markets in Asia for the past 10, 15 years. And demand has certainly not decreased. Now that's an alarming thing, because, you know, I remember Robbie and I sitting 10 years ago and saying, well, you know, with the increase and the improved access to information, you know, the internet, someone getting and Googling and saying, does a rhino horn cure this condition? And, you know, as those capabilities and as those availabilities became more, you know, apparent to people, that the demand would decrease, and it hasn't. So then you look at it and you say, well, where is the demand increasing? And we're seeing a decrease in the traditional Chinese medicine demand. But now we're seeing an increase out of Vietnam on the social market. So it's become quite a hip thing to in a Saigon nightclub to order rhino.
Yeah, that's
and
horrible.
so it's one of those incredibly difficult things to try and get your mind around. I mean, but the concern that we have is that there are going to be new demands and new markets for a product which is seen to be incredibly valuable, and it is. Right now, I was having a chat with some people day before yesterday, and it looks like right now the price being paid, the end price. So let me try and explain that one. Rhino horn goes into many products, and you can walk into a little supermarket, a little shop in China, and order a lotion which is advocated, which is intended, it's purported to contain rhino horn. Now, whether it does or not is immaterial. If you factor in the end user price of all these different lotions, medications, whatever, you're looking at around about $65,000 a kilo.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, that is like, that is twice, 3 times what cocaine is costing in the same geography. So, the syndicates are not going to let this go. They're making huge amounts of money out of it. And unless we do our stuff right down here and balance the risk-reward ratio more favorably towards us, we cannot win.
Yeah.
So we have to, that risk-reward ratio has to be balanced in our favor. And the kind of technologies and the kind of commitments and the kind of dedications that we're showing, and you guys together with us, all right, that is going to balance the risk-reward ratio in our favor. So until we do something like that, the syndicates are going to be finding new markets for rhino horn and anything else that they can produce and source. So does that, I mean, this is a debate that you and I could have for hours, and we would enjoy it.
It's an extremely difficult debate, but I'm afraid that we have to also move on to the description of this specific challenge. But we can maybe get together later and do a panel discussion about this specifically, because it's a very interesting one, but it's of course not that much related to what we're gonna do here and what we're here to discuss. So I'm afraid Kamal, your question has to wait for the second Q&A. Because I'm just gonna briefly go into the next challenge that we're gonna do and just the specifications of this challenge, because it's a very important one as well. So to that end, I'm sharing my screen again. So here we are. We just had some very interesting background information from Peter and Robbie about everything that they're doing at this moment. And I also gave a very short breakdown of the first challenge. So a reminder there, if you want to know more about what we did in this first challenge, there is a recording of the entire session on our YouTube channel. So the link to that session, to the final presentation, is going to be shared in the chat right now. So you can view that later. And but what we're going to do with the second challenge here is creating a machine learning model that can detect poachers and is optimized to run on edge. So it has to run on the plane. And the reason for that is because there is a delay between the plane and the ground, which means that if we were to run a model on a computer on the ground, or maybe in the cloud, even worse, such a delay can cause for the plane to already be 100, 200 meters further along or even farther. which means that the poachers are already out of view. And of course, you want to detect them straight away. So that's the reason that the model has to run on the plane and do direct detection, you know, and be able to scan many times per second. And for this, it's also necessary to put the hardware together, for which we laid the groundworks, looking at, but with an eye on the energy and weight constraints. So that's an important one as well. And working together with Spots to implement this on their wildlife protection drone. So this is going to be a big challenge, but this is, you know, the reality of bringing AI into practice, which is well, very exciting to me at least. So the images that you can see here, this is Robbie throwing the plane in the air, very nice action shot. And then here on the left, you can see an example of the kind of data, you know, the thermal images that they're looking at during the night. And then on the right is just an example of some of the hardware that we would be could be using. Now, the format of this challenge is really a team of 25 to 50 AI engineers from all over the world. You know, we already have a lot of applications from all over the world with diverse cultures and domains working together to crowdsource an AI solution to this problem within this period of 2 months. At the end of this period, everybody that participated, they will receive a certification and also go through peer review, which will be, you know, signed by the partners, which is a great thing that you know you can show to anyone that you want to impress with your AI skills, employer or family. And so this is a great way to learn about the real world application of artificial intelligence, and just by doing. But there's also going to be a couple of masterclasses like Matt just talked about in the beginning of this presentation. So the application period is running until the 13th of September. Then we're going to review all the applications. We're already reviewing the applications. I actually already accepted the first bunch. And then the challenge is going to run from the 15th of September to the 17th of November with a kickoff there, research education phase, then a midterm presentation and a final presentation. So that's just a brief overview of that. Now, in terms of participation, people can join as contributors. This is the bulk of what we need. So 8 to 12 hours per week for the whole 2 months. Then people can also join as a coach. So if you're really experienced machine learning professional, and you can, for example, help with, you know, your experience around object detection, then you can also join for less hours and coach the sub teams into, you know, going in the right direction and all of that. Then we're also looking for people, teachers like Matt, to give a relevant masterclass about either machine learning topic that's related to what we're doing here, or a domain masterclass like the ecology masterclass that Matt is giving. So the people that can apply is really from junior to medium to senior data scientist or developer, because peer-to-peer learning is a big part of what we do at FruitPunch AI. Now, you can also join if you have a background in hardware engineering, but also if you're a domain expert. So, for example, with a PhD in or working on a PhD in anthropology, I believe that could also be an interesting addition if you want to propose your own sub-research that you want to attribute and contribute to this challenge. So the way that we're going to be working together is, of course, fully remote, and it's Scrum-ish. I call it Scrum-ish because we have like a weekly heartbeat, which is kind of like the daily stand-up, where you report on, you know, what you did the last week, what you're going to do next week, and discuss any problems, challenges with the main stakeholder. And then to really go into defining the tasks and all of that stuff, you will have sub-team meetings with the sub-teams from this larger group that you're, you know, working on a specific machine learning model, you know, trying out a specific machine learning model on the data set. And the communication will all run through Slack, and we will also provide, you know, cloud computation and anything that you might need to participate in this challenge. You really only need an internet connection, if I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit, but you get the point. So that's it in terms of the explanation about the format, and then we go into the Q&A around the challenge, and I will just you know, go through all the different questions that came into the Slido. So but maybe I will just open the floor up to live questions first. That might be interesting. I'm just going to give that a couple of seconds. We are about at the full hour, so that's the end of the session. But I'm sure that the people that want to ask their questions are very interested in the answers, and this is usually the engaging part. So who would like to ask a question?
The thing that the computer that's running on the drone, is it something equivalent to a Raspberry Pi?
I think so. Robbie knows this best. I think at the moment it's a combination of if I remember correctly, it's a Raspberry Pi, but then it's also the computer, the Pixhawk, which is the autopilot and control of the plane. That's what's on there at the moment. But then, of course, hardware can be added to be able to run the machine learning model. Robbie, do you want to go into that a little more? We also have Fez here, by the way, who worked on, I believe he's on the call, who worked on the hardware team last time around.
Yeah, okay, so in a nutshell, yes, we're running a Raspberry Pi Zero at the moment, which Johan managed to successfully integrate via the healing system. We will be moving on to the Nano, and whatever you guys decide, I think that becomes more technical, which model Nano we use, whether it's the Xavier or I know there's 4 different ones. And, you know, that's based on what you guys need to ensure that AI, you know, works the way we need it to work. But at the moment, it's running Raspberry Pi Zero. That's purely for video. There is no, obviously, there is no detection going on there. It's purely the link, because we had to move, as I mentioned, from our analog system over to the digital. The new thermal cameras are digital as well. So yeah, that's that should answer your question on that, I hope.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, cool. Is there anyone else that wants to answer or ask a question live before I go into the Slido questions? Give that a few seconds. Okay, then we're gonna go into the Slido questions. So the first one that I have here is, did you consider building an intelligent probabilistic model of where rhino populations and poachers witnessed so that you can have more patrol on those areas? So basically modeling where the rhino populations are and the poachers that have been found are, and then patrolling more on those areas. So is that a question that you can go into directly like that, Robbie and Peter, or shall I try and give it a go?
Yeah, look, in a nutshell, currently we rely on a couple of triggers from early warning systems and intelligence that's fed to us via the grapevine. Historically, we have data, but you must understand that through the different seasons and the population of rhino move around, the method or the MO of the various poachers, depending on which syndicates are active in the area, vary. Some are vehicle drop-offs, some are fence breaches, some are via personnel. So it's you know, looking at historical data just gives us the poaching stat. We try and gauge time, lunar time, weather conditions, external factors that may encourage more poaching. But again, that's something that's out of our control. I think what you're referring to is like predictive modeling. And I would love to say that that's something that possibly needs to be looked at. At this point in time, we believe that the presence and how we deploy the UAV with this sort of you know, AI on it, the risk reward factor moves into our favor. And at this point in time, we're literally trying to stay ahead of the main curve. You know, so yeah, I hope that sort of answers your question.
Yeah, Yeah, I think it's something very interesting further down the line, and also very interesting for the really large parks. I believe I know an organization that is doing some of this on other places on the continent of Africa.
In Kenya.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have a whole list of technical questions here. So you mentioned the first question here is, you mentioned the previous model was too large for the architecture. What was the actual size, and how much of a size reduction are you looking for roughly? So so I'm gonna give this question to Sako after. I'm just gonna give like a brief answer. So basically the metrics that we're looking at is, can we with you know the hardware that we can run on the plane. So this is like you know those computers like a nano Jetson Nano board. Can we with that run a model that can you know look multiple times a second so that we won't miss poachers? And at the moment, at the end of the previous challenge, this was once every 8 seconds. So that's obviously way too little. But I'll give the word to Sako to maybe dive into that a little more. And if Matt wants to join in, that's also completely
Yeah, so just to briefly answer your question, I don't know the full size like by heart, but indeed, as Buster told, it took 8 seconds for one inference on a Jetson Nano, which is surely way too long. Though this is with a full-fledged detector-on-2 model, which actually should be trained on RGB images, and this was one channel. So there are a lot of rooms for optimization here. We can look into model pruning. We can look into how's it called, extraction learning, that we learn with a different model the labels that we create with this model. And there are also just way tinier models, like, for example, Tiny YOLO, which can do similar stuff and probably with a similar accuracy if we get the training labels right. So we are looking at a significant reduction, but there's also a lot of room for reduction.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Nice.
So can I just mention something here?
Yeah.
For what it's worth, Johan and I were discussing this, and you know, our current thermal camera delivers 60 frames a second. And I just you know, broke it down, and realistically understanding what we potentially need. If we could get to an ideal of 4 or 5 frames in a second, that would be great, because I was just trying to calculate, you know, the distance covered by the drone at a particular height and at particular speed. You know, if it's a second, we potentially, you know, we're covering nearly 20 meters in a second. So we could potentially miss. So I figured, well, you don't need the full 60 frames in a second. Ideally, you'd need at least a frame or 4 frames in a second. So every 250 milliseconds, you'd need a frame to go through the AI. The other thing I discussed with Johan, and I'm just putting it out there, what if, and this is because I don't understand how all the stuff works, but in a nutshell, is it possible to split the feed? And so only 4 frames or a frame a second goes into the AI, but the balance of that feed is still streamed down to us. So thereby not loading, you know, the capacity of you know, the hardware.
That shouldn't be a problem. So we can definitely both stream and process the data at the same time, because streaming it often requires specific hardware. And we can definitely get to like 4. There's also options to go to stronger hardware, adding Intel Neuro sticks to do that. The problem with more computation on the plane, of course, is less battery life for the plane itself. So that's always, there is room, but it is a trade-off here.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're gonna move on to the next question, because we have a list here. So next question is, have traditional vision techniques been considered, such as adjusting for camera translation and then motion detection to find candidate windows for deep learning? So I think the short answer to this is yes, but Sako can give a more elaborate answer to this.
Yeah, so actually Matt is a super expert here, but the images are actually super wobbly. It's almost impossible to get them stable enough to do that kind of visual analysis on movement, because, well, both the camera is moving in several ways, the plane is moving in a different direction. So we have considered it, but haven't found a way to get the images stable enough to even try the simplest versions of classic visual analysis. So someone would be free to still try do more advanced stuff that we were planning on at first, but we didn't see a way to get the footage stable enough, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
I can add to that there. I think the last sample with the new thermal cameras was done with me literally hanging out a helicopter, trying to hold the camera in a prop wash, myself and Johan. And I think that's the reason why that data was wobbly, if you want. Typically, when it's in the plane, it's a lot more stable, and certainly maybe what you're talking about now might be easier to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah, I just for the people, there are some questions in the Slido regarding some more questions regarding the previous model. So there's a link to the YouTube video of the previous presentation, the final presentation of the last challenge. So that might be interesting for you guys for viewing. So here's a question that I think is relevant to address right now. Will there be tasks, parts of the project that can be handled by a junior/beginner data scientist? So yeah, definitely. I mean, you will of course be under the guidance of people that have more experience, but there's always projects, parts that you can pick up, and at the very least, you can take this opportunity to learn and to apply your skills on a very specific topic outside of theory. I don't know, Sako, if you want to add anything to that.
Oh, no, so basically, all hands on deck here. Everybody that knows his basic Python can definitely already do contributions. So any data science junior will be able to add information there. And indeed, you can learn a lot from the rest of the team. And it's also just, challenge-based learning, right? So if you pick up the challenge of something that you're not experienced in, the life of a developer is Googling all the time. So that will be the case here as well. So as a junior, you'll be perfectly able to do that as well.
Yeah, exactly. Then I have a question that I can quickly answer myself. So how can you guys tell from watching the UAV's feed if a person is definitely a poacher or just a wandering tourist? So how we can tell is that they are there because the parks are not opened during the night, and next to that they're not open next to the main roads during the day anyways. So anyone that is there unlawfully and is therefore someone that needs to be removed, and at least, and at worst a poacher. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Robbie.
No, spot on. I mean, traditionally, operationally, we've operated at night. And as you say, in all the national parks in South Africa, other than designated picnic spots or viewing spots, are you allowed to get out the car? Anybody walking in the park is going to be a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
So, excuse me.
Yeah.
So actually, we can say that the problem can be like formulated just the detection of a pedestrian or a walking individual, and that's it. So there is no differentiation on the behavior of the movement or the action. It's just the existence of an individual. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Yes, you could expand on that a little bit more. And traditionally, the syndicates that have been operating in our area send the guys in, sticks of 3, and one guy is typically carrying a rifle. So, yeah, it's never a single guy, and I don't want that to be set in stone. It's typically 2 or 3 or 4. Depending on the operation, how the syndicates operate, but individually, I've not seen in all the years, and Peter can back me up here, I've never seen a single poacher. Understand that they're operating in Big Five territory, and he, you know, over and above the fact that he's walking at night under the moonlight, he needs his wits about himself walking in the Big Five at night. So yeah, you know, there are some factors that we could help with detection, but any human form factor is what needs to be identified, and then at that point one would make a call thereafter whether to further investigate or whatever action is necessary thereafter.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So next, so I have a quick one here. Will computer vision be utilized for image detection? So, I mean, object detection has already and will be used. So I think that's an answer to that question, unless I'm mistaken. So then we also have a question here. Do poachers often carry radios? And if so, is there scope, is it possible to bring in radio sensors to try and triangulate their position? I believe we spoke about this before, but I can't remember the answer, Robbie.
Look, in a nutshell, the guys typically don't use radios unless it's personnel that are complicit. They would typically use cell phones, and even those are a challenge by virtue of the fact that most parks don't have full cell phone range coverage. So I had a discussion the other day with some organization that is bringing in some very sophisticated cell phone tracking technology. But yeah, it's, for us, it would be that sort of technology we deployed, and it would be what we would call a trigger. So, you know, on the boundaries of the park. So before they get in, you must understand that our whole mission is to prevent any poaching. We typically don't like to use technology that is reactive, in the sense that you get to a dead rhino and then you know you've got poachers. We want to prevent them getting in the park. So yeah, that technology is definitely going to be available. But from our perspective, we're operating within the park, and you know, the thermal camera and going forward, you know, the full day camera is going to be of huge benefit.
Yeah. And about cameras, talking about cameras, what is the question here is, what is the resolution of the camera being used? So what is the resolution of the new camera being used? Maybe
okay, so it's a FLIR boson, not the commercial type. This is what we call an ITAR restricted camera that was donated to us by FLIR. It is 640 by 520 by 60 hertz. And then there's a whole lot of other specifications as far as the pixel pitch is concerned. I can't remember offhand. Johan, I don't know if you remember it. I don't know if that's enough, but I think for you guys, that's possibly what you're looking at, is the resolution and the frames per second.
Yeah, and it's grayscale. That's another relevant one, I think. Yeah, and then I saved this one for last because I thought this is well, this could be a very lengthy answer. So last question is, well, it's not really a question, it's more a statement. I'd appreciate a quick overview of the previous model architecture and its size. So like I said, there's a whole presentation about this, but maybe Matt still has the energy, sprung, to go into this one, to pick it up, if he's available still. And otherwise, I'm gonna, yeah, I think I just saw my.
I am still here, Buster.
Yeah.
I can't give the exact specifications that have been requested. It was a Detectron 2 object detection model, and I actually at the time didn't get all of the details beyond that. So I'm afraid it's not that I don't remember them, it's that I didn't have all of them to start with.
Yeah, we had, of course, a lot of people working on this in different subgroups. Sako, can you say something about this?
Yeah, so we have the code, so we can provide that. Surely we will provide that to the group that is working, that's going to work on this. And in that code, you can see the full specification. But how it works is that the Tracton 2 model framework actually chooses some of those metrics itself. So you provide the type of data that you're going to put in and some other metrics, and it will actually devise a network itself. So you don't fully specify the network specification yourself, but you can see that in the code that will become available.
Yeah. So for that one, I guess you will have to join the challenge, but I think many of you already have. Okay, that were all the questions. Unless we have any burning announcements, contemplations from our partners, and I don't think so because I don't see anyone unmuting. That means that we're at the end of the info session. We went a little bit over time, and that's an understatement, but thank you so much for sticking around, and thank you for all the very interesting questions. And hopefully we'll have the time to really go into other anthropological questions in the future as well. But for now, we're gonna focus on getting this challenge off the ground. And then hopefully at the end of this next 2-month period, have a model that is working on the plane in South Africa. It still sounds like science fiction to me, but I know we're very close, and I know that with the people that I already saw that applied, we are able to do this. So I just want to say as a last thing that I feel very honored to be able to work on this together with Robbie and Peter, and of course everybody from FruitPunch and all the community members. And I'm looking very much forward to this challenge, and I hope to see you all at the kickoff on the 15th of September. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me. You can find me anywhere. Buster is very easy name to find online. LinkedIn, our Slack group, our platform, my email, wherever you want, reach out to me and I'll get back to you. And until very soon, thank you so much for joining, and have a very fruitful day. All right. Cheers.